Welcome, everybody. I'm Joe with ECRM, and thank you for joining us on this presentation about marketing for 2020 and beyond. My guest today is Mark Evans, the Executive Director with the Sasha Group, and he was originally scheduled to speak at our personal care and healthcare sessions in person. But now that they've switched to virtual, we're going to deliver his presentation to you in this kind of fireside chat style format. He's going to have some slides, and we're going to discuss the different topics in which he presents. So, Mark, thank you for joining us. And before we get started, could you give us all a little background on the Sasha Group and what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Joe. Certainly, I've always enjoyed the ECRM live events. This is the first time for me doing the virtual one, so pretty stoked to be joining. I'm an executive director at the Sasha Group. Basically, I lead our New York office. I haven't been in our New York office for a long time. Looking forward to getting back there sometime in the future. But really, the Sasha Group has been around for about a little over a year. We were founded by Gary Vaynerchuk. And if you're unfamiliar with Gary, Gary is kind of a serial entrepreneur, has early investor in a lot of digital properties, really started VaynerMedia about 10 years ago. VaynerMedia was really built for the Fortune 500, really scaled that to about, multiple offices globally, really servicing the Fortune 500 with a bullseye on the Fortune 100. About 2 years ago, we decided that there was a large market of businesses outside the Fortune 500, growing businesses that we could be able to work with and be able to take a lot of our thesis around what contemporary marketing looks like and being able to help apply to their businesses to be able to help them grow. So that kind of birthed the Sasha Group. We're about 45 people overall. We're in New York, Tennessee, and on LA and the West Coast. So pretty exciting stuff overall. We really focus on consulting and being able to work on retainers to be able to help businesses grow, as I said. So being able to help them with strategy, being able to help them with creative, media, whatever their needs are, whatever their gaps are.
Excellent. And today's discussion is going to be around marketing for 2020 and beyond. And I think that's going to be really interesting because 2020 has changed so much. So I'm really looking forward to getting into the discussion on how to adapt the marketing and content around the new environment.
Absolutely. If you had asked me at the beginning of the year to think about marketing, what we're currently going through, I could not have guessed that at all. So it's definitely been interesting. So I will pull up my screen right now and take everyone through the deck. This picture is very fitting. Joe, I will give you the props for that call. It's a very representative of kind of what a lot of us have been living through for the last couple months, a mask in our phones. As I said, Mark Evans, Joe knows this, I always have a picture from Point Break in all my presentations. I couldn't let him down, had to keep going with it. So a big part of what, when I think about marketing and think about kind of the best ways to kind of bring to life your story, I think the big first point is always about understanding kind of where people are spending their time and understanding where attention is. And that's something kind of one of the first kind of pillars for us. And so when I think about where attention is, it's really around the phone. And when you think about your time spent and all the things that you do with your phone, it continues to dramatically increase, every year. When you look at the manufacturers, Apple, announcing a lot of, updates yesterday to their iOS, it's becoming more and more capable of a tool for our life. And so when you think a lot about kind of over the last, 10 years, let's say, we've certainly have shifted from, a kind of sitting back, watching TV to more of a kind of leaning in, watching TV potentially and a phone. I certainly, we certainly spend a ton of time still with, a TV, but most time we also have another device with us. And so this was actually a study that was done, around a launch of a premiere of a program. And what you'll see here is, if you look in the bottom of the chart, you see the minutes of the show. To the left side is activity on Facebook. And so you'll see, the spikes are happening during the commercial breaks. And so that's a big thing. So when you think about it as an advertiser, I'm like, holy moly, like the time the money I've invested to be able to potentially put a commercial during this TV show, people aren't even paying attention to it, because you can see they're going on to, and this example was for Facebook, but it's very indicative of how people are spending their time, where, when they're multitasking, watching TV, and watching the content, but during when the time the content's off, you're seeing spikes in time spent with social media platforms. So I think that hopefully this is a behavior that a lot of us can relate to. I know I certainly can.
For me, that it would be the same exact thing, except it would be on LinkedIn. That's my go-to during TV commercials. I mean, I feel bad. Why would anybody continue doing TV commercial advertising? Because this is really, I would expect this is very similar among all consumers.
Yeah, and I think the only time that I would maybe say it's a little bit different is maybe the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Super Bowl, it's such a culture around commercials, but I would contend maybe it still, has a spike, because even when I'm watching the Super Bowl and commercials, I'm then live tweeting about the spot that I just saw or something of the sort. So yeah, it's definitely a behavior that I think is fairly universal for a lot of different age demographics.
Yep. And when you think about the Super Bowl, the commercials really are part of the content too.
Yeah.
But the way people, they're expecting to have some awesome stuff. It's going to be funny. It's going to be strange. It's going to, that's where they're going to, and the amount of money that people put into those Super Bowl ads, not just paying for the spots, but the production of those ads, it's going to be entertaining. So
you hit the nail on the head, Joe. Entertainment right there. And so when we start looking at, going a little bit deeper in terms of the time spent with our phones, it's jumped this year, and certainly, that has something to do with kind of what we're going through right now. When you look at kind of 2019, 2 hours and 43 minutes per day, in 2020, they're predicting, 3 hours and 6 minutes. And honestly, that's pretty low, from the people that I'm friends with, and in my own time, 3 hours is probably on the lower end of the time that I spend. So, certainly the last couple of years, you've seen a dramatic increase. This year, definitely, I think, has, COVID-19 has accelerated many trends, and spending more and more time on your smartphone, and what brands are bringing to life within the phone environment is certainly kind of keeping us hooked.
Yeah, and speaking of COVID, there's also more instances where you're waiting. So because everybody's social distancing, and you have people waiting to get into stores, waiting online for this, waiting online for that, and what are they all doing while they're waiting online? It's just like that first picture that you showed.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a phone has become many people's best friend, or during this time period. So then, let's dig a little bit deeper and kind of double click into where they're spending their time. And so this is a bit of an eye chart, but what you'll see here is that, when you look at, 2019 to 2020, you're seeing, social networks, a jump there, a jump, in video. So you're certainly seeing people, once again, trends are being kind of accelerated based upon kind of the environment they're living in. So, being able to look at, hours of the total day, 7 hours and 31 minutes, when you start looking at between, desktop and mobile. And so it's really, a tremendous time that we're spending in the digital space. And then when you look down, the other media, whether it's TV, radio, print, there's, a flattening to decline, across the board there. I think one of the interesting, trends when you look at, and I don't think it's on this chart, but it's certainly the amount of time we're spending with on our phone has gone up during this time period. What will be interesting to see is once knock on wood, whenever we get to a better place around COVID, does the kind of, the fact that we're using our phones, as a phone, still exist, or does that kind of, plateau and go back to other the other usage numbers from previous years?
Well, and on that chart, the audio on the top, would that include podcasts and maybe audio books and things like that, as
Correct.
opposed to radio,
Correct.
which is on the bottom? Okay.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's a good point to hit upon. And the thing is, when you think about podcasts too, podcasts were growing pretty substantially, and they've, but I think a lot of people use podcasts during their commutes. And so you had a lot of people that kind of missed out on commutes. I mean, for myself, speaking personally, it's like the amount of time that I've spent with both podcasts and even some of like Netflix, because I commute on a train, has gone down, because I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
But you're certainly seeing a lot of the podcasting platforms investing a lot of money and being able to bring in talent and better experiences overall to their platforms. Spotify is constantly in the news there.
Well, yeah, you saw the Joe Rogan deal with Spotify, and didn't they just ink a deal with somebody else too?
Yes, and I can't believe it's slipping my mind. They had another high profile, one, and they're certainly also bringing out, from a marketing perspective, tools to be able to help drive better conversion for marketers within kind of the Spotify podcast environment. So a really, really, as I said earlier in the presentation, COVID-19 has definitely been an accelerant on many trends, especially in the digital space.
And you know what I've seen a little uptick of, and I don't know, maybe it's because people are spending more time at home, but I'm seeing more uptick just from our content in the video side on YouTube, where it's usually, if it's on YouTube, if it's on a podcast, they would do the podcast on a normal day during travel or something. But with people home more, and this is just anecdotal, but, they would be more likely, or at least they'd have more time to be able to sit and watch something versus listen to a podcast while they're doing something else.
Yeah. It's definitely, just the way that things have been kind of, shaken up over, the last couple of months. It's going to be interesting to see how things all kind of, in terms of our own behaviors, what sticks and what doesn't stick, going forward. Overall, I feel very confident, though, that the digital is going to be a big part of consumers' life going forward, for a broad spectrum of people.
Yep.
Really kind of, some of the key platforms that we're seeing right now and really tapping into, from a marketing standpoint, everything that goes from kind of the established kind of Facebook and, Instagram, Twitter continues. Twitter has grown a lot, to Pinterest, YouTube, LinkedIn continues to grow. And then, TikTok has been a favorite of so many, when you look at like, kind of younger kids, in terms of their usage. So I think the big thing is that like people are spending a ton of time on these platforms, and they have a massive amount of scale. The key thing is these are very, very different platforms. LinkedIn and TikTok are two very, very different platforms. LinkedIn, Pinterest, very different platforms. So when you're thinking about it from a marketing standpoint, from a brand standpoint, you have to keep that in mind. So you have different audiences on these platforms, many times, but you also have different experiences. And so your content can't just be a one size fits all. If you're a company, you have to be able to think through these platforms and the audiences and the nuance of these platforms. The things that you can be able to bring to life on TikTok, you can't do the same potentially within Twitter. And so use that to your advantage when you're thinking about your audience and where they're spending time and the strengths of those platforms and how you want to be able to tell your story as a company, as a brand.
It's interesting, and I'm a big believer. I think it's important to, and I know you guys are believers in, building content that's specific to the medium you're going to be on. And what I've been seeing and what we've started doing ourselves is, while we're not on TikTok as a company, some of our teams, as we've been doing our virtual sessions, have been using TikTok to create fun videos
Yep.
that we would download and post on our LinkedIn pages. So, for instance, our this week we have one of our health and beauty care sessions going on, skin bath cosmetics and natural beauty, and some of the HBC team did a TikTok of them like in a robe with a towel on their head. Then they put the makeup brush in front of the camera, pull it away, and they're done up. And then somebody
Love
else
it.
with a mask on, and then again they block and it's just they're making a bunch of cool, fun videos just to let everybody know that hey, this is going on this week, and we're the people behind the scenes that are here for you. Getting their faces out there in a way that's fun, but yeah, they're using it and they're using TikTok, but they're not posting it on TikTok.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
using it for LinkedIn.
No, I love that. I mean, TikTok has inspired, so many platforms, and from a feature standpoint, of fun things you could be able to do in the digital space. So it's a great example, and it's definitely, I think the great thing is you have this so many different platforms with a lot of different functionality and features that you can be able to really, whether you want to do, long form video on YouTube, and then to your point, Joe, having quick little, stop motion, videos on TikTok, or doing memes on Instagram. Like there's just so many different things you could be able to do around kind of these platforms and the content that you create overall.
Yeah, and then I think one thing that's really important for brands to know is that they can do this in a way that's efficient, right? You guys talk a lot about developing content at scale. Can you touch that? Or I know you're going to be talking a little bit about that later, right?
Yeah. No, I'll definitely kind of jump into a little bit right now. I think it's often people look at content and content creation as oftentimes very daunting. And I think, they're like, how can I be able to have new content daily? And we often recommend to companies, it's like, okay, find a hero, an event where you can be able to capture kind of a hero piece of content. So, for instance, whether it's an event or an interview with a founder, and and that piece of content ends up being 3, 4, 10, 15, 20 minutes long, you're then able to have someone go in, edit it, be able to take out some sound bites, be able to have some still images, be able to create some GIFs from it, quote cards, whatever the case may be. Essentially, you can be able to take that one piece of content and create kind of a whole quiver of assets from that one piece, and then be able to use it in both paid and organic postings for the appropriate audiences. But that allows you to be able to scale, and it allows you to be able to repost many things. Oftentimes people say to me, "Hey, I've posted this once." And I was like, "Yeah, you posted it once organically, so no one saw it." Yeah. You can be able to post these things multiple times, and be able to put paid dollars behind them. Before really burning out audiences on seeing something so many times. And that's the thing too, is like with this content, we're big believers in pushing out a large volume of content and allowing the audience to be kind of the objective decider of what's good and what's not good. You and I, Joe, might look at a piece of content and say, we both don't like that, don't post that. But actually it could end up being something that the audience loves. Yep. And so I think it's more important to be able to, capture as much as you can, be able to produce it, push it out, don't get caught up in perfection paralysis, and really be able to then look at the data and say, oh, you know what, like, people really found these topics really interesting. Let's start doubling down and be able to maybe make some more content around that versus just relying on your gut on what worked and what didn't work.
Yeah, and we're a case study of that, and I, have you guys and Gary Vaynerchuk to thank for it because I follow that exact model. Just as an example for people who are watching, this interview that we're doing now is going to first be posted in long form on our YouTube channel strictly for the registered participants of healthcare and personal care. They get the first look at it. Then once those sessions are over, we're going to rip the audio out, put it on our podcast. Going to transcribe it, edit it down, post it as a blog with the podcast link and the full video embedded in there, so they have options. Then we'll pull segments out and spread them out on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Twitter with links to the full content. And then we'll do, what do you call them, the quote cards? So we'll do like an infographic with maybe a quote from something from here or a slide or something. But this way, it kind of, not only does it have a bigger reach, but for us, it lasts. It takes people through at least a month, and we may bring some back later on, like you said, depending on what performs well, we may post something months down the road that's still relevant to our audience. And we'll revive it again. So,
yeah. Hopefully you're taking good notes, listeners and viewers, because Joe just outlined the formula for you right there.
And I stole that all from, if you go to, just Google how to create 64 pieces of content in one day. So it's a deck that's 270 pages long, I think, and it outlines all of that stuff. And that is the sole reason why I got into how I did my podcast, was based on what the tools that he mentioned in that slide deck. But I highly recommend it for any brands out there. It really helps you to get the most out of your content with very limited resources.
Absolutely. So won't spend too much time on this, but when you look at kind of platforms right now and growth, you're starting to see kind of Twitch, which is a gaming, and Pinterest, while small, they're continuing to grow. TikTok isn't even on this chart, but it's definitely one that you'll start seeing, growing, more and more based upon, the way the year it's had this previous year and the current year we're in right now. Instagram continues to grow, YouTube. So you're still seeing a lot of growth and people spending a lot of time with people over platforms overall. I think the other big trend that you've kind of seen over the course of this year has definitely been e-commerce. It's been a trend previous to this year, but once again, going back to kind of acceleration of trends, e-commerce has been massive. And so when you look at, the jump from 2019 to what we're, projecting for 2020, an 18%, increase, which is certainly pretty substantial when you look at, the 700 and almost $710 billion. And so it really kind of comes back to, I've spoken to many clients, in the beginning of March, that kind of came to me and were like, man, our e-commerce is not in the place that it needs to be. We need to figure this out. And so I think a lot of companies found out the hard way, during this time period about, not having an optimal e-commerce experience. It's something that's really imperative to be able to invest in, whether you're a retailer or a brand, because people will continue to be using, e-commerce as a way to be able to purchase, along with in store and in person type sales.
Yeah, and this is huge. This is something that we've been reporting on a lot in our posts. I've been talking about different data from whether it's Nielsen, whether it's IRI, showing just the explosion of it across all different categories. And a lot of consumers first, they're buying different things online that they never bought before. Regular household staples and food that normally they'd go to the store, they've switched to e-com for it. The thing is, they're going to stay on e-com for a lot of these products because they've just realized how easy it is. And it's a combination of Amazon, but they're also starting to spend time on brands' e-commerce sites as well. So it's all over the place. They're finding different sources. And again, there's something you and I talked about earlier, is that, the out of stock situations in different places might drive people to newer platforms, newer brands, and to seek out those products that they want. So, and they're just getting used to it. They're getting so used to it that, they're thinking, why should I take a chance and go into a crowded store when I could just order all these things online.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, too, your e-commerce experience is part of your brand experience. And for you to be able to, I think it's always been important to be able to build, to build a strong brand. But when you start thinking through the digital experience you're bringing to life for your customers, think through everything, not just your marketing and messaging, but that user experience, to Joe's point, that convenience, that you're looking to be able to bring to someone to be able to, create kind of that frictionless, repeat, and something that they can be able to say like to their friends, like, hey, if you haven't, checked out this.com or been able to purchase, this brand, it's really been, something really enjoyable. And I think a lot of the brands that I think also are really doing a great job in e-commerce comes back also to the fulfillment. So when you open that box and having, whether it's a card or something that basically talks to you about whatever you've purchased, I think is always a nice touch too, and being able to think through, that unboxing moment and being able to have something, it's like I picked up, Nike had sent me I got a pair of shoes from Nike this week, and it's like, they have, the minute you open the box, you have a QR code, right there, and just things to be able to deepen that experience of being able to purchase something versus maybe that I would be able to go into a shoe store and be able to buy those shoes, and the things that I maybe missed out on is being kind of compensated for or even elevated through, the unboxing and what they provided experience.
Gotcha.
Health and personal care is one of the big areas of growth. So when you look at kind of retail e-commerce sales, you're seeing, I think 0.4 here, a 32% increase in terms of sales around health and personal care. And it's unsurprising to me, Joe. I'm not sure if it's one that you were like, hey, I'm surprised by this one, but I think it makes sense based upon my own personal, experience right now, and how I'm thinking about what I'm buying online and what sort of things I'm like, yeah, I can just click that and I don't need to go to the store for that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's this whole quarantine thing has changed, and the pandemic has changed the way people view things around healthcare and wellness. One, we've been forced to do things on our own. You and I are perfect examples of that. We've both recently trimmed our own hair with a pair of
Exactly.
wall clippers. So, we're having to take our personal care, a lot of those things, do it ourselves. But it's also making us realize that we can do a lot more. There's a lot more out there that we can do. But by the same token, people are taking a longer term view of healthcare and wellness and personal care in terms of longevity. This has really made everybody look hard at their own health and what things they could do to live longer and to live healthier and to better fight the potential of getting a virus, through these things. So they're a lot more aware. They're buying a lot more things related to health, and they're just taking a lot more actions, and they want to learn more about it. So it's not surprising, especially on the e-commerce side, people that have a lot more time to search different websites and learn more about taking care of themselves. They're getting that information about the products they need to do this, and so that's definitely going to drive a lot more of this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Joe. And it kind of goes back to like, okay, where are people spending their time? Digital. They're interested in being able to, maintain their health or strive for better health or appearance. And it's like, and then so like whether they're Googling or they're, coming across an ad in their Facebook feed or Instagram feed or whatever the case may be. So I think it's, it's certainly important, during this time period to continue to go on the offensive and be, as a brand, being able to get content out there to be able to help, bring to life who you are as a brand, what sort of consumer, needs that you help kind of solve knowing the fact that people are spending so much time in the space right now, and some of people, have more free time than they did previously. So I think just being able to take advantage of that or understand that, and be able to think about, okay, how can we double down on our content engine to be able to get out, educational content, entertaining content, whatever stuff, utilitarian, having, videos around how I can better cut my hair. Like literally, I can't, and this kind of speaks to, there was not very good branding on this one, but I watched a video in the beginning of like key tips I need to think about when cutting my own hair. And it's like, if I was, whether it was clippers or what, like a grooming company, being able to make sure to have like logos in the bottom right, or proper branding, that was something I spent a couple minutes with in terms of content.
Yeah, I could tell you, I learned how to do mine where Jocko Willink posted a video on how he shaves his head. And I'm curious to see how wall clippers sales spiked after that, because while he's doing it, he pointed out the fact that he uses wall clippers, the fact that they're American made, and it was not a sponsored ad or anything. He just told everybody what he did on a normal basis, and he did it before the coronavirus. He did it all the time anyway. But I followed his tips when I did mine. So, but the other thing that I'm seeing is on the men's grooming side of personal care is that there are a lot more cooler commercials out there nowadays, right? You had the old, in the beginning, a while ago, you had, what was it, the Dollar Shave Club, but you're seeing a lot more Dollar Shave Club style commercials. You have Manscaped just came out. They're big on TV commercials and online. You have the Old Spice with the motor guy. There's another one. I'm forgetting the name of it, but I know, it's a soap. Is it Sasquatch soap?
Oh,
with the guy with the long hair and the beard,
yeah,
and he's just like standing next to dudes that are showering, and he's smelling them. But he's got a series, and he does other men's products as well. And but they're just really funny. They're ads that you're going to see on Instagram that you're going to share with somebody. And it was funny, this past weekend, I was with my brother, and he's in his truck, and he's got that bar of soap sitting in the cup holder. And by the way, it does smell really good. And the reason why is because he goes fishing all the time. And what he does is he just, it takes the fish smell away from his hands. So he just leaves it in the car. But he saw those commercials too. And it's just, I'm seeing a lot more, and I don't know if it's particular to men's grooming, or maybe those are the only ones I'm paying attention to, but they're doing a much better job of making these types of ads. And they first started on social media, Manscaped and that soap company, and they started on social, and now I'm starting to see them on TV. But these are things that you would willingly share just because they're funny.
Well, I think that's a really good point. One of my early clients was Philips, and working on when they launched their body groom. And that was in like 08, 09, 07, 08, 09. And so we did a lot of, this is early YouTube content, and we won a lot of, the product sold tremendously well. We won a lot of accolades for the creative, but it was really centric around, like, we created stuff that was funny, and we were very aware of like our audience. And at the time, the audience was basically the whole, creative team, and, the strategy team that was working on the brand. And we really made something that we all like laughed about, and we all kind of shared, like genuinely shared. And that's the thing, like, the personal care category you can have a lot of fun with a lot of stuff. And it really kind of comes back to, once again, like understanding your audience and understanding kind of what they are interested in, and how they communicate overall, and being able to leverage that in creative, and not being afraid to be able to go out and try stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of really great stuff overall in terms of like just content, and like it's funny. I always say, I'm like, there's ads and then there's content. And to me, ads are much more self-serving. They're very much a canned, like, scripted, like buy now type thing. Versus when you look at, like, going back to your Dollar Shave Club example, like that was entertaining to watch. Like that was good content. And I think everyone should think about their ads as being good content, but a lot of us don't.
Yeah, and if it is good content, it doesn't feel like an ad. It doesn't feel like an ad at all.
Exactly. When you can connect with when you can connect with the user and have them be like, laugh and rewatch it again, or whatever the case may be, pass it along, comment, whatever the case may be, like that's what you want. Like you want, the holy grail for marketers is relevancy. You want your brand to be relevant to someone. And so many marketers and so many brands work in this vacuum and don't really think about that. So it's really key to do so.
And that's a good segue to your upcoming slides.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Joe. So it's even easier than ever to kind of connect with consumers at scale. And so this first one, I think, you and I were really just driving this home right now. It's about understanding your audience, taking a human-centric approach, really understanding kind of their language and being able to, connect with them, on an emotional level. Emotions are what make us share, make us purchase. How can you be able to just, find that connective tissue?
And I mean, funny stuff is what gets me. That's the stuff I love to share. But you're right. Everybody's got a different thing, and nowadays there's a lot of emotional things going on, both with the pandemic, with the protests. I mean, it's just, there's so many things, but also I think it's, and I know you're going to be talking about this as well. It's just, keeping your audience in mind in the context of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, right now, I think some of the best brands out there, they have a clear understanding of what their company's mission is, what are the values that their company embraces, and that allows them to be very thoughtful and the types of content they're creating and the types of conversations they're engaging with. And I think the companies that have that sound foundation, that when you see them put out something or you see them respond to something, you're like, that makes sense. I get it. It doesn't feel like out of left field. It doesn't feel disingenuous. It feels like, okay, yeah, that's what this company stands for. So I think if you're a company, you haven't thought through of a clearly understanding of that North Star of what your mission and what your values are, certainly do so, because your advertising will flow so much, nicer from that. Next, I talked about attention, but really kind of the formula we start thinking about attention is kind of like eyeballs and impact. And so it's like, where are people spending their time? Being able to understand what platforms they're on. Furthermore, being able to understand the addressability of those platforms. So when you think about a lot of the digital social platforms, they have a tremendous amount of data, and that allows you to be able to create much more tailored messages than maybe some other platforms. And as I mentioned earlier, we're striving for relevancy, and having that data and being able to build out kind of personalized, messages, and even furthermore, kind of personalization at scale. Being able to have many cohorts of different types of messages against different audiences really allows you to be able to hopefully hit more home runs, because you're driving home a more relevant message, for a selective audience.
I think one of your clients, Young Nails, when I had a conversation with Habib, he mentioned that, and he talked a little bit about something you mentioned earlier, was the fact that creating all that content, putting it out there, and then seeing what the market does, and then it'll tell you where to kind of put your money, you know. And he mentioned, I thought this was interesting. One thing was, like we talked about before, 2 pieces of content that he thought were horrible perform better than everything else. So you just never know. But then also he leveraged like the algorithms for, I believe it was Facebook, where they would automatically boost up the ads or the creative that was performing the best.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I
do they
mean,
still do that? Or
like within the platforms, once you're doing paid media within the
yeah.
platforms, most of them have algorithms that they will optimize based upon
Hmm.
what they're seeing. It's much smarter than you or I.
Yeah.
And so I oftentimes I have clients who are like, hey, I want to change something here or there, and we're like, no, let the algorithm do its thing.
Hmm.
Let they're looking to be able to get a certain sample size, a certain amount of impressions, to be able to really understand patterns, to be
Hmm.
able to then start saying, okay, like let's shift dollars from cohort A to cohort C,
Hmm.
and really being able to leverage the intelligence that's really built in to these platforms and their ad buying tools.
So it's important to leverage the technology and let them bear a lot of this heavy
Yeah,
lifting.
and the native tools on the majority of these platforms, that's what we use, honestly.
Hmm.
There's plenty of tools out there that you can go purchase to layer on for your buying. Unless you're at some tremendous scale as a brand, the majority of our clients, we don't use stuff like that. You're basically having to end up paying a certain percentage fee on top of your buying, and it doesn't really bring anything to value that would really offset that fee. So the native ad tools are what we use, and something I recommend, for the majority of the companies that attend your type of events.
Excellent. And is that your workout that you did when the CrossFit gyms were closed?
Exactly. I do a lot of lifting with my finger there. And the final point is around kind of arbitrage. The attention is even better when it's underpriced. So when you think about Facebook years ago, Facebook was heavily underpriced as from an attention standpoint. It's still a pretty good value. A lot of these digital platforms are still pretty good value in terms of where people are spending their time, and how you're able to connect with them. So really understanding where things are undervalued. And for instance, there are some markets where I'm like, radio's undervalued, and it makes sense based upon the audience and what they're spending time, or out of home is based
Hmm.
upon the audience. So it's not just about like have to use digital, and digital is the only thing underpriced. It's more so of like understanding your audience and how they're spending their time, and being able to figure out the tools you can be able to connect with them, and seeing where it lands, because there are things that outside of digital that are definitely underpriced, and to take advantage of. So I think it just it comes back to that big thing of understanding your audience and understanding attention.
Hmm.
Next, around kind of like hacking culture. And so what I'm kind of talking about here is there's a lot of different lenses that you can be able to use to tell your story overall as a brand. You can certainly tap into what's going on in the zeitgeist, being able to look into regional trends, or seasonal trends, sports related things, nostalgia. Looking into tapping into a lot of companies have used influencers throughout the years to be able to kind of take their brand story and kind of tell it in a way that connects better with their audience. And that's what it really comes down to. Once again, it's like these are ways for you to increase your relevancy. The big thing is it's finding the ones that are genuine to who you are as a brand, and that are ways to be able to actually connect with your audience. I think for so many years you had so many brands jumping on every social media day, and I always call it like kind of cheap heat, where you're like, oh yeah, happy National Donut Day, but
Yeah.
I'm like, I sell a hair cutting, a trimmer. Nothing to do with it at all. Like you have to be able to find ways to like genuinely bring to life your story that's not just simply you jumping on every trend possible, but finding the right things that make sense, that are going to be able to help move your business forward. And that's the big thing, is being rooted in like real business change versus oh, I got a lot of likes on this. What does that mean?
Yeah. So just because something may be trending out there, it doesn't mean that it's right for you to jump into it.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be
Absolutely.
relevant. It's got to be authentic to what
Yeah.
your business is.
Exactly. You have to just be some, apply some thoughtfulness and figure out, because this comes back to the thing too. It's like if you're chasing every trend and making content for every trend, like that's potentially could be a large waste of your time. There might be a lot of trends that actually do make a lot of sense, and you have to then decide how you want to spend your time and which ones you want to focus on. But just doing something just to do it, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something.
Yeah.
And finally, kind of connecting with empathy, and I think this has been a trend, been massive over the last couple months. Brands that really listen, understand where their customers are at. When I think about early stages, I live in Connecticut, outside the city. In March, early stages, kind of COVID, it's like more or less kind of like stuck at home. And I found with a lot of brands, I was seeing brands that are like, I was getting content from them, whether they're through their e-newsletters, of things that were kind of even outside of their wheelhouse, but it was something that like basically they're like, hey, these are 5 movies you might really love, and it was tied back to who they were as a company. But it was something I was like, cool, this is actually useful because this is like, obviously the company is a clothing company. It tied into an interest that their customer base had. And it was something, useful, because I was like, yeah, I can definitely deal with watching something, or whatever the case may be. So being able just to understand where someone else is from a customer standpoint, and how you can be able to, make their life, whether it's a little bit easier, be able to have them crack a smile. I think, what you've seen over the last couple of months are brands that have been able to, bring forth comfort to people, bring forth some a smile, some ways to be able to pass the time. You've seen a lot of home decor companies that have come out and been like, hey, here are some great ways to be able to spruce up your home office. Tons of fitness companies and supplement companies who are like, hey, here are easy, workout, things you could be able to do in your garage with limited, weights. Just being able, and a lot of these things weren't tied to a sale. These are things that were like about brand building and just, being a bit of a human being on the other side.
I think that's really important, and it's something that I've encouraged, other people within the ECRM team to do as well. Is to keep in mind that all of your posts do not have to be about the category or about the business, as long as they're relevant to the audience and make sense for us. So, for example, one of our team members posted something about, what are you wearing when you're working at home? How, what outfit? Because, it may not be about health and beauty care or grocery or general merchandise. But now everybody's working at home, so it's incredibly relevant. But this was before coronavirus. But still, a lot of our audience works from home. They may be startup founders or salespeople, some buyers, that work from hotels. So what do you wear when you're getting into work mode? And it resonated extremely well, got tremendous engagement, a ton of comments from both retailers, suppliers, and everybody, because it struck a chord with our audience and something that's kind of relevant for them, even though it's not specific to our category. So 100% correct. I'm a big believer in that. I'll try to mix in that kind of content. I also believe that not everything has to have a call to action.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think furthermore, what social also really allows brands who are experimenting with their products, you have a very vocal focus group, in your community. And so I think some of the best brands that I've seen out there, they really look to their community and the comments they see, whether they're in, purchase, ratings or within their own posts, of ways to be able to enhance their product overall or their product experience. So it's not just about simply the marketing, but also thinking about the product and being able just to hear and saying, oh, you know what, that, we're seeing a trend, or a pattern of comments around how we're packaging this device, or, hey, you know what, we could be able to think about, the color scheme different, or, wouldn't it be really cool if we, thought about, sending an email along with this, or, you start being able to like listen to your audience, look for patterns, and being able to take advantage of those patterns. And so it really just comes back to, I think, hopefully a big trend from kind of today is that like the importance of your audience and truly listening to them, and not be in this silo just pushing out things, but really being able to be responsive and really thinking about that audience first in everything that you do.
I think that's a great way to sum it up, because it's all about the audience. If you're not being relevant to the audience, you're not going to get the attention, and then you're not going to get everything that comes with it. So Mark, thank you so much for all this information. I always enjoy chatting with you. And, for those people who want to get in touch with Mark, him and actually one of his, some of his team will be in select meetings during both our healthcare and our personal care sessions. So you'll be able to connect with them that way. And then the website is www.thesashagroup.com.
Yep.
Got it right? That's it.
Absolutely. Yep. And my email address is mark.evans@thesashagroup.com.
Perfect. So thanks again. And I look forward to eventually getting together with you in person, either in New York, over at, what was that restaurant again? The Stand, or?
The Smith.
The Smith. Why do I keep, there's a stand the Stand is by me. So we'll get together at the Smith. I'm looking for it. They are doing outdoor seating now, so maybe.
I see that.
But then you got to trek all the way into Queens, so into Manhattan anyway. But we'll arrange that one of these days once it's happening for a little bit and everybody feels more comfortable about it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks a lot for having me on, Joe. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Yep.